This week is a double parsha, and the names of the two parshios are Acherei and Mot-Kedoshim. And there's a very interesting thing about these two parshios. The last chapter of Parshas Acherei deals with the subject of incest, prohibited marriages. It gives a list of prohibitions. That's Vayikra chapter 18. Then in the next parsha, chapter 20, skip chapter 19, chapter 20 reviews this entire list of prohibitions, giving the punishments for a person who commits incest. Sometimes the punishment is capital punishment, the person will be put to death for certain forms of incest. Sometimes the punishment is Acherei, which is a divine punishment. We have two chapters which deal with the subject of incest, chapter 18 and chapter 20. In between chapter 19, we have a chapter which begins and ends with the idea of being holy, Kedoshim Tiyu, that a Jew is commanded to be holy. And the rationale for this command is because I, says God, am holy, and therefore I ask you to be holy. And there's a whole list of mitzvahs that apparently relate to this theme of holiness. Now, that's going to be a very, very tough challenge to work out how all the mitzvahs in chapter 19 are related to the idea of holiness. But let's just take it for granted, because the chapter begins with the admonition to be holy, it ends with the admonition to be holy, so these are the two bookends, so to speak. Undoubtedly, everything in between is related to this theme. Now, this chapter 19, again, is preceded by a chapter that deals with incest, and is followed by a chapter which deals with incest. So just on the basis of the structure, without going into the themes in any detail, it seems that somehow the two pillars which flank this chapter 19 relate to incest. So incest comes before, incest follows, and in the middle we have this command to be holy. So we have to understand exactly what the idea that underlies the structure is. We also have to understand what exactly is wrong with incest. When the Torah says you can't marry your mother, you can't marry your sister, you can't marry your daughter, not your aunt, not your daughter-in-law, what really is the prohibition of incest? What is the idea which underlies incest? Now, of course, there is a very strong incest taboo in our society. Because we live in a society where this is considered revolting, it's considered disgusting, it's considered unimaginable. Maybe not unimaginable, we reached the point where it's imaginable already, but it's something which is totally abhorrent to the person. But where did this taboo come from? Because it seems from Chumash that this was considered totally acceptable in Egypt. It was totally acceptable in Canaan, in the land of Canaan, where the Jews entered after the 40 years in the desert. So it seems that the taboo originates with the Torah. In other words, the Torah prohibited these marriages, and the Torah had great influence on other peoples, our so-called daughter religions, Christianity and Islam, and this reinforced and reinforced and reinforced the incest taboo to the point that in our culture, incest is considered abhorrent. But it probably started from the Torah. It isn't that the Torah is a reflection of the already existing taboo. To the contrary, the Torah certainly presents it as if this was a revolutionary idea, that incest is wrong, that the prevailing cultures allowed it, and the Torah is trailblazing, if you will, by introducing the prohibition of incest, but it was successful in establishing the prohibition, laying the groundwork, and thus creating a taboo which is shared by many societies today. But what's the rationale which underlies it? one conjecture which has been offered is the genetic consideration. As we know that when people have children with close relatives, there is an increased risk for birth defects, abnormalities, etc., etc., etc. And therefore that's why the Torah prohibited these types of marriages. I'll mention as an aside, I don't know if this will remain on the tape, maybe it'll be cut out, but there was an editorial in last week's Globe and Mail where the following issue was raised. You know that it's become almost an accepted part of liberal doctrine that gay marriage is to be accepted. In other words, if you are opposed to the concept of gay marriage, you are crazy, bigoted, a homophobe, etc. Because all enlightened people are meant to be supportive of gay marriage. So the person raised the question that why not take this to the next step? If we're going to legalize gay marriage, why don't we legalize incest? Because as long as it's between consenting adults, and why don't we allow close relatives to get married? Again, I'm not talking about molestation or anything like that, but if the person wants to marry his mother, his sister, his daughter, and they both agree, then why shouldn't society permit that? And of course, we have to discount the yuck factor, right? It just can't be that we don't allow it because it's disgusting. These people who want it should be allowed to have it. So the author says something, the author of this article, this editorial, said something which, if you don't listen to his own words, you see how bizarre and insane his argument is. So like this says, we all know that the incest taboo provides for a reproductive advantage. When you think in evolutionary terms, you always want to introduce strategies which will result in an evolutionary advantage, and a reproductive advantage. So here, by upholding a very strong taboo against incest, we minimize birth defects, which is a reproductive advantage. And therefore it's very important that society should uphold this incest taboo in order that we should have a successful reproductive strategy. Well, when I read this article, I said to myself that the taboo against homosexual marriage is even more important. If you're talking about a reproductive advantage, heterosexual marriage over homosexual marriage has a very great advantage, and for reasons I don't need to explain. So, the point is, if you're going to say that we have to proscribe incest because we want to have this reproductive advantage, the same reason applies many-fold for the proscription of homosexual marriage. So if the person just listened to himself, he would see the argument makes no sense. But there's something else I want to point out, and maybe I'll be accused of being illiberal. But I want to point out one very interesting thing. The modern welfare state, which is, I think, the goal of liberal politicians to institute, is really, as we all know, a Ponzi scheme. In other words, the workers surrender higher and higher percentages of their income in order to support the elderly, the disabled, etc., etc., etc. So in order for the scheme to work, you need more workers supporting fewer retirees, etc. When Social Security was introduced into the United States, the average life expectation was under 70 years. So people who retired at 65, on average, did not live more than 5 years after that. So you didn't need that many workers to support the retirees. It says now, people are living longer than ever. If you hear a person passing away under 80, you feel that there was a premature death. I think it's really true. If someone would tell you, well, such died, he was 79, he said, so young, 79. I mean, people are living well into their 80s. And people are having fewer children. So this is like a Ponzi scheme going awry. I mean, this is infinitely worse than anything Bernie Madoff dreamt up. Because we have a situation where we're having greater and greater obligations imposed upon society and fewer people to carry the burden. So you would think that in such a society there'd be a tremendous push for people to have more and more and more children. And the funny thing is that the only protected group is the least productive group, which is the group that advocates homosexual marriage. The bizarre thing is, and this is a little bit of a critique of Orthodox Jewish life, that the only economic subgroup that goes against the Ponzi scheme are Orthodox Jews, where it's the opposite situation, where the parents are supporting their children for years and years and years and years. So you would think that at least in the Orthodox community, we'd expect the opposite. We'd expect an attempt to limit the number of children that are born, because if the parents have to support the children, it's much easier to support 2 than to support 10, right? But what do you find? The exact opposite. So it's just one of those things that you have to think about. It's very, very strange that where the parents are supporting, they're having many, many, many children. Where the children are supporting the parents, they're having no children. It's a bizarre thing. But I think this genetic theory of incest is questionable on another basis, which is that we have to ask ourselves what comes first, the chicken or the egg. In other words, the fact that these types of marriages produce offspring with birth defects, is this the reason why the Torah made the prohibition? Or did the Torah make the prohibition, and therefore to encourage us to comply, God set up the world in such a way that there would be negative consequences? In other words, it isn't necessarily that these consequences are the reason for the prohibition. This is just a incentive to live by the prohibition. So we don't know whether this argument holds water. I'd like to share with you a second idea, and ultimately a third idea behind this prohibition of incest. Because we know that the family plays a very, very important role in Jewish life. The family is the environment in which children are nurtured, in which children are educated, raised, in which they are trained to become productive and valuable members of their society. The family can only work if the members of the family relate to each other in very, very specific ways. In other words, a brother and a sister can really only live under the same roof if it is clear that the sister is not to be the object of the brother's sexual desire. In other words, if the girl has to concern herself with the fact that maybe her brother is hitting on her, then they can't live under the same roof. Parents cannot function as parents to children. Children cannot have that trust in parents. Whereas if there is no incest taboo. And if you read accounts of the victims of incest, this is really the single idea that emerges from everything they write. The idea of the loss of trust, the fact that they were deprived and denied a upbringing, a genuine childhood, etc. The family cannot function. What has to happen in a family, that children are nurtured in an environment of trust, of caring, etc., can only take place where the relationship of parents to children is altruistic, where the relationship of children to parents is trusting, and where the relationship of siblings to one another is sibling-like as opposed to romantic. Right? And therefore, the only way that the family can function as a family is where there is a taboo of incest. In other words, if incest was to be allowed, then the family wouldn't function as a family. Or they would just fly apart in all directions, because you could not live together as a unit under one roof where this taboo isn't enforced. So therefore, since in Judaism family is so important, and the reason family is so important is because to be a Jew there's a lot to learn. Because you have to be trained, you have to be brought up, you have to be educated. Whereas even when Jews lived in societies where the vast majority of people were illiterate, Jews knew how to read and write. It was unimaginable that a Jew could be raised to be illiterate. To be a successful Jew, you have to be educated, you have to be able to read the Torah, understand the Torah, practice the Torah. But there are traditions that are passed down from generation to generation, values. That is within the nurturing environment of the family. That requires the incest. This is, I think, probably the strongest rationale for the prohibition of incest. But I can share with you a third idea, and this is from the Sefer Me'ashilavach, from the Ishbitzer Rebbe. It says an amazing insight. It's an insight which has relevance to marriage, courtship, many things apart from the idea of incest. But it starts in this parsha, and he's commenting on a very specific verse. In the end of Parshas Kedoshim, we have a reference to the punishment for taking one's sister. So, one interesting thing is that Torah speaks about incest or any sexual relationship always speaks euphemistically, because it never speaks in a coarse way. It's always a very, very, very delicate way of speaking. So it says as follows. It says, V'ish asher yikach es achoso, if a man shall take his sister, bas aviv or bas imo, the daughter of his father or the daughter of his mother. In other words, not necessarily a full sister, even a half-sister. V'ra'ah es erevasa, and he shall see her nakedness. V'hi sir'eh es erevasa, and she shall see his nakedness. Now, this obviously is a euphemism, right? I mean, it's not the point what they saw. The point is what they did. But this is a delicate way of speaking. So it says chesed. This is considered chesed. Chesed. V'nichrasu la'inei v'nei amo, and they shall be cut off before the eyes of their people. This is the punishment of kares. What does it mean chesed? This is chesed. Chesed always means kindness. Kindness. So Rashi and the Ramban say over here that the simple meaning of this verse is that we're using chesed not as chesed is used in Hebrew, but chesed as is used in Aramaic. Sometimes the Torah incorporates foreign words into its speech. Just like when we speak English, sometimes we'll incorporate foreign words. In other words, when speaking English, and I'll say, you're such a nudnik. It's not an English word, it's a Yiddish word. But we sometimes incorporate words from foreign languages into our speech. So Rashi and Ramban say that here, the word chesed is a Hebrew word, which means kindness. But in Aramaic, the word chesed means shame, something shameful. And Rashi proves this because if you go back to the book of Bereshis, you have the word cherpa, cherpa. And the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the word cherpa is chisuda. Chisuda is the Aramaic Targum of the word cherpa. Cherpa is something which is shameful. And the Aramaic translation is chisuda. So Rashi and the Ramban say that in this context, the word chesed is being used not in the Hebrew sense, but in the Aramaic sense. That if a man takes his sister, commits incest with his sister, chesed, this is a shameful thing. And the Ramban explains, what means it's a shameful thing? Because this is the form of incest that everyone understands intuitively is wrong. In other words, when you get to some other more distant relatives, you can already wonder, like, what's so bad? If a person marries his aunt, for example. Okay, how bad is that to marry your aunt? It's not really a blood relative. Okay, so you shouldn't do it, but it doesn't strike you intuitively as being wrong. But to commit incest with your sister, right, that everyone understands is wrong. So therefore, chesed, that is shameful. That is something which everyone understands as being off limits, it's shameful, and therefore the Torah prohibits it. That's the simple meaning of the verse. Again, the difficulty is readily understood. In other words, we're talking about a parsha which is all written in Hebrew, and all of a sudden one Aramaic word is thrown in. So it's a difficult interpretation, but this is the simple interpretation that Rashi and the Ramban cite. Then Rashi quotes a medrash that the word chesed should be understood in the conventional sense. This is chesed. This is kindness. This is kindness. So what does it mean as kindness? A person who incest with a sister is kindness. So Rashi brings the interpretation as follows: that the Torah is coming to answer a question. Im taimar, if you ask a question, kayin nasa achoso, who did Cain marry? We know we had Adam and Eve, right? Who did Adam marry? His clone, right? Chava was his clone. Chava was taken from him. It wasn't his sister, it wasn't his daughter, it was his clone. The clone is not your sister. That's okay. But they had a child. They were the first two parents, they had children. So who did Cain marry? This is a good question. Because you look in the Chumash, there's no mention of their having had any other children. They had 3 boys. So who did they marry? So Chazal say that they had twin sisters as well. Okay, so Cain married his sister. How could you marry your sister? The Torah prohibits that. So it says, V'im Taimar, Cain nasa achoso. Cain married his sister, and the Torah here is prohibiting that. Chesed asa hamakayim. God performed a kindness, live nice oilamo mimenu, that the world should be constructed in that way. Shenemar, as it says, oilam chesed ibana. The world was founded on kindness. This was an act of kindness that Cain was allowed to marry his sister. Now that's a little perplexing. The simple meaning of the Rashi is that we're using chesed in the sense of a dispensation. Whereas really this is something that should have been prohibited. But the world wouldn't have gotten off the ground because all you have are brothers and sisters. So God made a dispensation. And as a rule, this is something which will ultimately be prohibited, but in order to get the world moving, I'm going to allow Cain to marry his sister. So it's also a funny use of chesed. Chesed is a kindness. If I do you a favor, I do something nice for you. In other words, here, it's like I'm giving you permission to do something which really you shouldn't do. So it's not like a kindness. Am I doing you a favor? Let's say you're on a diet, and you really shouldn't eat things with sugar. So now I'm going to do you a favor. Here, eat this. It's not good for you, right? It's not a favor. You should do it. Yeah.
Well, the first chesed was Chava for Adam.
No, that's what I said. That Rashi isn't bothered by, because they weren't brother and sister.
I understand.
Right? They weren't related.
But with respect to Adam, she was a chesed to him. In other words, he needed a companion.
That's very nice. If you would have told me that that was a chesed that God gave Chava to Adam, I would say, 100%, it was one of a chesed. But remember, what does Rashi say? Rashi is saying, we're talking about the prohibition of marrying your sister. So it says it's called chesed. Why is it called chesed? We'll eliminate this question. Ask the question, wait a minute, but if you go back to the beginning of the world, we know that the whole population of the world started by someone marrying his sister. Now that was a chesed, that was a kindness that God extended. That Cain was allowed to marry his sister. So I wouldn't call that a kindness. Why is that a kindness? I mean, there's a saying in Hebrew that a hechrach, that which is necessary, lo yeshubach v'lo yagun. You can't call it praiseworthy, you can't call it shameful. It's just the way it has to be. There's no choice, no alternative. Right? In other words, you eat 3 meals a day. Are you considered like a better sort person because you 18 meals a day, or are you considered like a worse sort person because 18 meals a day? You have to eat, right? So it's not praiseworthy, it's not shameful. So, okay, there's a problem. Who's kind going to marry? Okay, you married his sister. Like, it's a kindness. I got to do him a favor here. You can marry his sister. The Ishbitzer Rebbe says an amazing pshat in this Rashi. An amazing pshat in this Rashi. So like this. There's the love that a brother has for a sister is something which is natural. The brother has done nothing to earn it, and the sister has done nothing to earn it. It's something natural. They're born to the same parents, they've been raised together, live together. There's a natural love for brother and sister. And by the way, there's even brothers and sisters who fight really love each other. And I tell my wife this all the time. When the kids fight, and she tells me, this one says she hates this one. I say, no, they really love each other. You don't realize it. They really love each other. No, she says, I hate you. That's what she says. But that's not what she means. Really, the one who says she hates the other would be the most upset if, God forbid, something would happen to the other. Well, obviously, you live in close quarters, and there may be a little sibling rivalry, and you're sharing a limited attention from parents, and maybe you're sharing a room and limited space. Maybe once in a while someone borrows something from the other, which they shouldn't take. So, okay, they get each other's nerves. But really, there's a natural love between siblings, which is not earned. That is the meaning of chesed in this context. Chesed means here unearned love. Unearned love. And the Torah tells us here that that is not the basis for a marriage. That a marriage is not meant to be, in God's idea, and we'll try to explain why this is not meant to be something you just fall into. That you find yourself in love, and therefore you marry. Marriage, the relationship which leads to marriage, is meant to be a relationship where each one earns the love of the other.
Each one?
Earns the love of the other. That's what it's meant to be.
You undermine the entire entertainment industry.
When we finish, Hollywood is over. That's it. All gone. But this is what the Ishbitzer says. And by the way, Rav Hirsch also says the same idea. But we're going to follow through the Ishbitzer. That the basis for marriage is a love which is earned. That each has earned the love of the other. Now, he doesn't describe this process. It can be several aspects to this. One is you earn it by what you do for the other. Another way of earning it is you earn it by being what you are. In other words, I can love you for what you do for me. I can love you for what you are. I acknowledge your virtue. I acknowledge your talents, your goodness, etc. And that way you earn my love. But the point is, that's really what a marriage is meant to be. When you marry your sister, so the love is, so to speak, automatic. It's natural. And that's not the foundation of a marriage. Now, I'll point out, in Jewish life, in traditional Jewish life, it is very, very difficult to find someone to marry. Because the opportunities for casual social relationships in a religious community are few. And the community is deliberately set up that way. So how do people meet one another? They're introduced. So you may be familiar with the idea of a shadchan. A shadchan is a person who is a matchmaker, so to speak. Generally nowadays, you don't have matches which are entirely brokered by parents, that the children never see each other. You don't have that. I mean, maybe by some very, very, very pious Hasidim you have that. I remember that there was a time that I used to engage wedding photographers in conversation. I used to ask them, tell me your most interesting wedding story. You know? So there was one photographer who told me he was doing a wedding, and he's taking pictures of the bride, and she asks him, tell me, what does the chassan look like? That was interesting. But that's extremely weird. You know, the initial introduction is made by a shadchan. Ultimately, the two young people meet, and they court each other, and they spend a lot of time together, and ultimately make this decision. Now, what is the wisdom of this? What is the wisdom of this system? Now, the system is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. In other words, when the introductions are made by professional shadchanim, often there are many unimportant considerations that get put into the pot. And that's a very, very unfortunate thing. Very, very unfortunate. I don't want to go into details. You know, this is being taped, but you know, it's very unfortunate. You know, there are considerations of money and considerations of family lineage, which really is often totally irrelevant, and there are considerations of totally nonsensical things. And you all heard the bizarre stories. The bizarre stories. You know, two children, different families are going to marry, so you want to make sure that the families kind of do things the same way. So, you know, they would ask, tell me, how do they clear the table in your house on Shabbos? Do they stack the plates, or do they take them away one at a time? Apparently, stacking them is considered inelegant. Right? I say that stacking them is inefficient, because then you have to wash the bottoms of the plates too. But, you know, but I mean, nonsense. It's idiotic consideration. But there is a certain wisdom to the system, because when people meet casually and they, so to speak, fall in love, you essentially have the same situation as a brother marrying a sister. In other words, there is no reasoning, there is no careful consideration which is involved in the match. As you have fallen into it. And that's what the Yeshiva is saying. That's not the basis of a marriage. In other words, you have not really earned each other's love, whereas you've just fallen in love. A shidduch, ideally, should be a system in which some very important issues are considered. You know, the young people's aspirations, their life goals, etc. In other words, if a young man is interested in devoting himself to a career in Jewish education, it's probably not a good idea for him to marry a young lady who's interested in the finer things in life, unless he's already won the lottery. You can't count on that as being your means of subsidizing a high lifestyle. So, you know, there are certain things that have to be worked out. Now, again, in the Orthodox community, you know, there are many things which are givens. But if you think about it, you know, in the broader community, they would also benefit greatly from a system of shadchanos. How often do you hear stories of people that get married, and all of a sudden, you know, the woman wants to have children, and the man says, "No, I don't want to have any children. Have children are a pain in the neck, you know, responsibilities, this and that. We don't want children." Now, again, in the Orthodox community, you don't have that as a rule. Generally, people get married. That's part of our culture. Everyone would like to have children. But be useful all the time. I would have thought, that's like the first thing you'd want to find out before you marry somebody, right? Are you interested in having children? But you hear stories again and again and again. People get married, and all of a sudden, down the road, not too long, the one says, I'd like to have children. No, I don't want to have any children. How does that happen? The answer is, if you fall in love, so you marry because you have these fond feelings for each other, but you haven't really analyzed any of the issues which are absolutely necessary to clarify for the marriage to be successful. Is it a wonder that the divorce rate is so high? Because once the divorce taboo has disappeared, speaking of taboos, then obviously, if it doesn't work, you just throw it away. Because we live in a time where everything is disposable. Who repairs a telephone nowadays? Nobody, right? So if the marriage doesn't work, okay, you break up. That's why it sounds callous, but when people come to me and they say that what can we do to prevent an intermarriage? What are you worried about? How long do you think it'll last? Sooner or later, the problem will probably solve itself. In any case, so this is what the Ishmael says, that you have to put the cart before the horse, so to speak. You have to begin with a relationship where each person has come to understand the other, each person has earned the love of the other, and that leads to marriage. And that's the basis. And that's why you can't marry your sister, and that's why you can't marry the girl you fall in love with, for the same reason. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It can't be that you spend more contemplative thought in the decision to buy a car than in the decision who to marry. Whereas if you want to meet a person who really is giving thoughtful contemplation to an issue, talk to a guy who's buying a car. These are the people. They've analyzed, they've read every issue of Car and Driver for the last 2 years, and then they've gone to 10 showrooms and test-driven 20 cars, and they know everything. The repair record, what models are recalled, they know everything. Because they're buying a car. It's a big decision. But I'm the opposite. I leased this car. Ultimately, I bought it. But when I leased the car, I told the car, I said, I need a small car to get her home. What do you suggest? So he said, no, it's fine. Good. What color do you want? I don't care what color you have. He said, green. Fine. What color falls to you? It's going to smell. You don't care? No, not at all. Right? Car runs, good. Not too expensive. Fine. Perfect. No problem. In other words, that is a decision which is trivial. But who you're going to marry, that's your life.